Oh, no. Okay.
Sorry, Rabbi, I got
I-
distracted. Go ahead, Marcia.
Marcia.
I'm a little confused, so if I'm confused, maybe somebody else is confused. So these readings today are rabbinic, is what you're saying?
Yes. Yes.
All right.
With the possible exception of Philo that you'll run into occasionally. And this section is the earliest section. Then the second section is medieval commentaries like Rashi. And then the third section is early modern, like from the 15th, 16th century. And then the final section is modern commentaries, but only Orthodox ones. So they have things like Rabbi Soloveitchik and David Zvi Hoffman and the Lubavitcher Rebbe and stuff like that. But nothing non-Orthodox. No Martin Buber, no Morgenstern, no Geiger, none of the ones that would be more interesting to me. That would have to be produced by someone else, and that someone else is not showing any interest in doing that. So, so we have what we have. Now, I chose here the same story as last week, which is about the Adam and Eve and the snake. And you can see at the top, well, we're starting from the verse where it says, um, um, this is why a man leaves his father and his mother and cleaves to his wife, and they become one flesh. The man and his wife were both naked, but they were not ashamed. The serpent was the slyest of all the wild animals that the Lord God had made. So this is where we're picking up the story, and we're going to look at some of these commentaries. Okay, I'll stop again. Marcia, any questions?
No, thank you. Thank you. No.
Okay. So if you see where my pointer is on the left side where it says verse, so I just read you the English 2 or 3 verses from the Torah, and it talks about that Adam and Eve are in the garden. They're naked. They're fine. They're having fun. They don't have any problems in the world. They're innocent. They're simple. They're relaxed. And then it introduces the serpent. And so the serpent's going to make trouble. So the commentaries are trying to explain what they're going to, why is there going to be trouble? What is the background? And one of the goals we're trying to figure out here is, what are the rabbis trying to do? What are their assumptions and how are they approaching the text? Where are they drawing their information from? What are they doing and how do they view the Bible? So if I was on a panel with some Christians and there was an interfaith panel and they say, how does Judaism see the Bible? This kind of exercise would help us to understand that. So if you look on the left side where I am, verse 24, the first 2 commentaries we see there are the Talmud Yerushalmi and the Talmud Bavli. Okay, anybody know the difference between these two?
I have a question first.
Yes, Minya.
Is there any way the print can be made darker?
No,
No,
but you can print it out on your own computer and then you have.
I did print it, but for my directions, I was supposed to start with chapter 3.
This is chapter 3.
But then how come mine says introduction and it doesn't have any of that?
podcast.
There were 3 photocopies given, and this is one of the 3 photocopies. You probably are looking at one of the other 2.
Okay, because this talks about what you were saying about Garden of Eden.
Copies deal with the same material.
Okay, I'll just listen.
Okay, but I'm sorry, this is the way that the print came out in the scan.
Just the kind of day it's been.
I have those days.
If it works out and we're going to use a certain source over and over, then we'll figure out, how to get it to you in a format that you can print or we can see better. But that's the best I can do for today. But this is one of those 3 PDFs. You were sent 3 PDFs. This is the ROR one, ROHR. The Rohr family was a rich Colombian Jewish family from Bogota, and they gave a lot of money to produce this series, which is still being produced. But the whole book of Genesis is done, and I think they finished Exodus, and then they're working on the rest. And each week there's a whole book for 1 week. So so there's a lot of commentaries. Okay, so Talmud Yerushalmi versus Talmud Bavli. I should just tell you, Bernie, any idea?
Yeah, Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmud.
Yeah,
What?
Richard,
Did you not hear me?
I'm sorry.
Jerusalem Talmud and Babylonian Talmud.
Oh, thank you. Okay, there you are. Where are you? I'm looking for your
He
picture.
is on the
Oh, there-
bottom left.
I see you.
Here, oh, I know.
Thank
Yeah, I
And-
just had it,
And what's the difference, Bernie, between the Jerusalem and the Babylonian Talmuds?
Rabbi,
from my understanding is Jerusalem is actually earlier than the Babylonian. But the Babylonian one, apparently, the Jerusalem one apparently wasn't as well developed as the Babylonian one, if I remember right. And so
Correct.
the Babylonian one is the one that really most people, the rabbis and people who are knowledgeable use for direction on what the Torah means.
Correct. And very good, Richard, and very good, Bernie. Thank you. So these, yes, Steve.
well, I was gonna say, if you want to see everyone talking, you can use your cursor on the edge of the panel and move it to the left, and you'll be able to see all 12 of us.
Move it to the left.
The cursor.
See where there's like a double arrow?
There we go.
That way?
Top arrow and a bottom arrow.
Yes. So you can expand the panel and see everybody,
Oh, yeah.
except for Minya.
Well, there's
How do you-
one
how do you-
more.
How
one
do you
more-
do that
one-
again? I have myself as one, Rabbi as two, Steve, you're three, four. I got 5 things, but there's 12 of us.
Yeah,
13.
there's
There's
13
seven I
now.
don't have.
There's
do you-
13.
The
And the last one would be Minya, which is on the far right.
See, I mean, I have a button, but I can only do 5 at a time.
So Richard is very correct. And so what happened was around the time that these sages started operating, or shortly after the Maccabean revolt in 168 BCE, the rabbis developed this concept of the oral Torah. And they said, God didn't just give a written Torah at Mount Sinai, God gave a written and an oral Torah, 2 Torahs. And Jacob Neusner calls this the dual Torah concept. And so they said God gave a written Torah, but God gave also oral instructions. And we have those oral instructions. And so the rabbis memorized different statements of oral instruction. Eventually, after the Roman revolts, there were 3 of them, Jewish revolts against Rome. The rabbis felt we can't maintain this oral tradition. We have to write down the oral Torah. So in the year 200, Judah the prince took all these statements, had them transcribed, and put them into an order that was called the Mishnah. And the Mishnah forms the basis of the Talmud. Then 2 groups, one in Israel and one in Babylonia, started commenting on the Mishnah. And the Mishnah, which is the same, and the transcripts of the rabbis in Israel, not just necessarily Jerusalem, but all of Israel, became the Jerusalem Talmud, and the same Mishnah, but with commentary from the rabbis in Babylonia, became the Babylonian Talmud. Okay, so I'll read you these 2 commentaries, and you can see if they're similar or different and what you think of them. Okay? So I'm back in the text that you can see on your screen, verse 24, Talmud Yerushalmi. V'dabek bi'ishto. And he leaves his parents and he cleaves to his wife. All right, some of this material is adult material. So if you have children around, please shut off the volume. Rabbi Elazar taught in the name of Rabbi Hanina. The rabbis love to quote who it was quoted from. What source prohibits all people from engaging in illicit sexual unions, just as Israel is prohibited? Question mark. Where does that come from? It is the verse. That is why a man cleaves to his wife. This verse here, which teaches that a man, any man, Jewish or non-Jewish, may not cleave to another man's wife, not to another man, nor to an animal. So what this is saying is that they're saying that this verse is the basis for Judaism's prohibition of sex outside of marriage, outside of heterosexual marriage. Okay, the next one, Talmud Bavli, right underneath it. Yazov ish et aviv ve'et imo. They're commenting on a slightly different part of the same verse. A man leaves his father and mother. Rabbi Eliezer taught, not Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Eliezer taught, the term leaves his father refers to the prohibition of marrying one's father's sister. That is, one must abandon all thoughts of marrying his father's sister and must wed someone else instead. The term, quote unquote, his mother, similarly refers to the mother's sister. Rabbi Akiva teaches the term his father refers to one's father's wife. Even if she's not his mother, it's a second wife, one may still not marry her after his father's death. While the term, quote unquote, his mother prohibits one's own mother. The term, quote unquote, and cleaves excludes marriage to another man, since such a relationship is not defined as cleaving. The phrase, quote unquote, to his wife rules out unions with the wife of another man. Finally, the words, and they become one flesh, indicate that a man must marry a woman with whom he can become one flesh, that is, who can produce children with him. This excludes animals with whom one is prohibited from engaging in bestiality, since they do not become one flesh. Okay, I didn't write this. Don't blame me. Comments on either or both of these commentaries from from different parts of the Talmud. If I see your hand, somebody will let me know. Marcia's first.
So that phrase that a woman, wait, where was it? There was one that, here, that whom he can become one flesh, that is, who can produce children with him. So that allows for a man to divorce a woman if she is barren, basically.
It's possible. It doesn't go into that, but and this is just one view, right? I mean, and this is obviously 2,000 years ago.
Right.
We wouldn't hold on it. It's interesting that they address gay marriage directly, and they say you can't do it for the, from sort of scriptural reason, but they don't seem shocked by the idea. So obviously there were people even 2,000 years ago that were just saying, we want to marry another man. And the rabbis are saying, sorry, that's not what the Bible says.
Well, that would be because they want to continue the generations and they want children.
Well, but if you have 10% of men marrying other men, then you still have 90% of people marrying women.
But they're maximizing.
Well, now, is it that they really believe that the Bible doesn't want to accept gay marriage, or is it that they don't want to accept gay marriage, so they find a verse that will support their view, or it appears to support their view? There's really nothing in that verse that really says anything about gay marriage, pro or against. So, but you're beginning to see a little bit how the rabbis are using the text for their own purposes. Okay, who else wanted to talk?
Cy,
Rich,
and then Richard and Pam and.
In these two verses of the, apparently, verse 20, these are the same thing. Where in the, I have the Bible, Torah open. Actually, it's only English Torah, and I'm in chapter 3. Is this beyond chapter 3 already?
no, we're in chapter 3.
We're in chapter 3. So I'm
chapter
trying to
3,
find it where it says about cleaving to his wife, cleaving to his mother, and he cleaves to his wife. Where would that be in this?
Verse 24,
Verse 24.
Oh, chapter 3, verse 24.
yes.
Okay,
Exactly.
I got.
Cy had his hand up.
Okay, here it says here. This is the Garden of Eden. He drove the man out and stationed east of the garden, and it sure, and it's not chapter 24. It's there. It sounds different. I mean, verse 24. So I'm not sure where we are in the Bible, at least.
Well, we have the biblical text on this page at the
This
top.
text may have different. This text, which is all English, there's no Hebrew in it. It's a complete translation of the Torah.
If you, I'll put it up on the screen more clearly, Richard. If you just look at the screen, you can see on page 47 there where my pointer is.
Okay.
Verse 24, chapter 3. You see the chapter 3?
Obviously, this book that I have of the Torah is does not correlate with what we have here. So I'll stick with this.
With you to the next time we have a class in person, I'll take a look at it and see what the problem is.
Okay, you know what? I'll bring this book.
You can see on the right where my pointer is. That is why a man leaves his father and mother, this is from the Bible, and cleaves to his wife, and they become one flesh.
Right.
Now, the rabbis are interpreting one flesh. What does it mean, one flesh? It doesn't mean that you're combined in the middle of sex. It's referring to the child that is produced from the two sets of genes, that you produce one flesh from the two sets of genes.
Where does it get that idea?
Where did they get this idea that one flesh is referring to that? I don't know, but that's clear.
I mean, I don't see that. I don't see that in there.
It's in the Talmud. It's not in the Bible, right? They're making a big jump. Correct, Donna. And where do they get this from? I don't know. And you know, and that, you know, that would be an interesting question if we could figure it out. But they clearly say it. So, and in a lot of cases, you'll see the rabbis will say things about the Torah that are not in the Torah. You know, you just, if you're an Orthodox Jew, you accept the Talmudic understanding of the Torah because of this dual Torah idea that God gave Moses all these explanations. So I'm not defending it. I'm not attacking it. I'm just telling you what they did. And if we can ever get my friend, the Orthodox Jew, in here, Marcia will make a list of questions and she'll drill him and she'll say, where do the rabbis get this? Why would you accept this? And he'll say, that's what they teach in our Orthodox synagogue, and I believe it. I accept whatever the rabbi says. But here, my group doesn't accept whatever I say. So that's my problem. Okay, so who else wanted to speak? Did we get to Pam yet?
Oh,
Yeah.
Pam
Pam?
and Cy.
Okay.
I was curious.
Am I,
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, Pam.
no, I think, Cy, I think you're first.
Oh, no, my question was simply, is there any mention of abortion
Well, not here.
in the Bible at all?
Well, that's a broader question that I can't address right now. The benefit of going verse by verse like this is we can see how the rabbis explain a particular verse. The problem is that we can't really address other questions because we don't know what's elsewhere. But to answer your question briefly, even though it's not on topic, there's not much in the Bible about abortion. There's one case, I forget where a man accidentally hits a woman with some plank. He's like carrying some construction planks, and he actually accidentally hits a pregnant woman in her stomach. And the woman miscarries and loses the pregnancy because of his negligence. Not deliberate, but by accident. But he still ends up causing the fetus to die. The rabbis interpret, or the Torah, it does not punish him criminally. If he had killed, if they viewed the fetus, if the Bible viewed the fetus as equivalent to a child, which some Catholics do, they would have dealt with that as, in an unintentional manslaughter, but they don't. So the man has to pay the woman compensation. So she suffered a loss, which they try to compensate financially. It's not ideal, but it's the best they can do. But they don't see, they clearly don't, the Bible clearly doesn't see a fetus as equivalent to a person. From that, you could easily derive that abortion in certain situations would be allowed, because it's not, a fetus is not considered a person. So killing a person is different than terminating a fetus. That is not to say that Orthodoxy, for example, would be liberal on abortion and say, abortion on demand is fine for other reasons, but they would not view terminating a pregnancy as murder or manslaughter or anything like that.
But I'm sorry, there is a scripture, and I don't know where it is in the Old Covenant, that says, before you were, I knew you, which would mean before that person was born, God knew that person in the womb. And would you want to destroy what God has made?
Research that and find out where that source is from. It may be from Christian sources and it may not.
No, it was from the Old Covenant.
So,
I want to say Hosea, but I don't know that.
All right, so your homework is to find out exactly where that's from, so I can further research that for you.
Okay.
But there is in the Talmud, there is the idea that before a baby's born, that that an angel comes and teaches the fetus all of Torah, and then why does the baby cry when he's born? And the story is because when the baby comes out of the womb, the angel is there and he gives the baby a little clap on the head when he's first born, which makes him forget everything the angel has taught him. And that's why the baby comes out, crying, because he just got hit on the head by an angel. And that's why when you learn Torah, it might sound a little familiar. And the sages are saying it's because you've learned it all before when you were a fetus. And that would obviously indicate that the rabbis felt that even though a fetus might not be legally equivalent to a person, a fetus is clearly more than a thumb or a toenail or even a kidney. So you would want to treasure the fetus if at all possible. But this is rabbinic, additions. Okay, but no more an abortion right now, if you don't mind. Let's try to stick to these two commentaries and anything directly in them. Pam.
These rabbis who are interpreting these verses are interpreting them to say something that's not necessarily in the text. They're, you know, they're creating a little more out of it than is actually shown on the text. And I'm wondering, were there also other rabbis who were interpreting this on a more, you know, what you read is what you get attitude?
Yes, but not, we might not call them rabbis. If we're using the term rabbi here to refer to the people who made the Talmud, then those people support this interpretation. But there were other Jewish interpreters who did not. And as I said, you know, and I feel more strongly about this than some of my friends, these rabbis controlled things at a certain point, and they just stopped copying those commentaries. So the ones that we have, such as Philo, Josephus, a book of Jubilees, were either copied by the Christians or found among the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Okay.
And that's very unfortunate. And James Kugel, who's a retired professor from Harvard, he wrote, you know, he collected a lot of them, and we studied him a little bit at times, and I love using his books, which are basically collections of these early sources. He calls the early Jewish biblical interpreters.
Sai has his hand up.
Sai.
It's interesting when I read all of this, I'm wondering what happens if the people don't observe these rules. What's the punishment?
Well, can you be more specific? Which rule are you? Which rule are we're worrying about now?
I didn't hear what you said, Robert.
Which rule?
Any of the rule. A man marries, he marries or has intercourse with another woman, things of that nature. Is there a punishment for this?
If you look at this, the Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud commentary, it says a man leaves his father and mother. Rabbi Eliezer taught the term leaves his father refers to the prohibition of marrying one's father's sister. So they are totally, as Pam just said, you know, saying something that's not in the text. The Bible says basically you pack your suitcase, you give your father and your mother a big hug when you turn 18, let's say, and you get to the airport and you take a plane to college, and you never go back to live with your parents again. What the rabbis in this interpretation are saying, when it says leave your father, it doesn't mean you give him a hug and go to college and they turn your bedroom into an office. Rather, it's referring, when it says leave your father, it's referring that you're not allowed to have sex with or marry any of your father's female relatives, specifically his sister. So it says leave your father and mother. What it means is you can't have sex with your aunt. And that's just not there in the text, right? So, but if you accept this dual Torah idea, then that's what God told Moses was the meaning of this verse. So you could see why I am not an Orthodox rabbi. If you were confused before, let me just confess that I just am not. And I can't be because of things like this. I just don't believe that God told Moses that that's the explanation of the verse. Number one, because I don't believe that God gave Moses all this oral instruction. And number two, that if he did, I think he would have come up with something more convincing. Because if God wrote the Torah, then the explanations would follow logically from the text, and they don't. They're completely, there's no connection, no connection from the text to what the rabbis are saying about the text.
So
Well, thank
where
you
did
for
they
being
get
you.
that idea?
Oh, raise your hand, and Steve will help me. Pam and then Donna.
Rabbi, thank you for being you.
Well, I'm worried if the Messiah comes and I have to go back to Israel as a Kohen, I may not be eligible to get a job in the temple. And as a Reform rabbi, I might not be able to get a job as a rabbi. So I may have to like really literally open my dog grooming salon. And that
You
would
won't make
be
a living at that.
what?
Never mind. It wasn't nice.
I
So
think
where did
Shirley
he,
said, if it comes to that, I may not make a good living because she has some doubts about my dog grooming skills, but I'll pretend I didn't hear it.
Oh, okay. I'll pretend I didn't say it.
Okay, Donna, your turn.
I just wondered, where do these rabbis say that they get this? Where do they get this idea from?
You
It's
asked me
gotta
that
come
before,
somewhere.
and you asked
If
me
they-
that before, and it's a great question. It's an extremely important question, and I don't know. I don't.
Okay,
And if we were to get into a higher level of it, maybe we could try to figure, there must be an answer. So it must have come from either something in Jewish culture at the time or something from surrounding culture, or there must have been some motivation to interpret it that way, or there must be some similarity in the Hebrew verbs, or there must be something. It doesn't just come from nowhere, but I don't know. I don't know at all. So, but it's a great question. It's a very important question. And it's a question I can't answer right now.
how much is this being accepted by people? Is this like
Well,
this?
Orthodoxy accepts it. Now, remember that the Talmuds are not primarily interested in exegesis for its own sake. We are interested in exegesis for its own sake, meaning that we're interested in understanding the Bible and Jewish commentaries on the Bible. That's it. The rabbis or the sages of the Talmud are interested in Jewish law. They're trying to develop a comprehensive Jewish law. Therefore, they need to have somewhere to go to come up with a list of permitted and prohibited sexual partners within the context of marriage. And they're very clear here. They said men can't marry other men because of a certain verse. Men can't marry animals. Again, and their reasoning is not that it's gross or not that it offends, it might be not acceptable to the animal, but because a person and an animal can't have children, which would be one flesh, one flesh. That's their explanation. So they seem rather not accepting that it's allowed, but they don't say anything negative about gay marriage. They just say it's not allowed because that's not what the verse says. And they're not even negative on bestiality. They just said it's not allowed because you can't have children. So they're interested in developing a law, and indeed, in the later codes, which are based on the Talmud, there'll be a list of prohibited unions. So they said a man is obligated to get married and have children. And who is he allowed to marry? He's only allowed to marry a woman. Can't marry a man. And they knew about transgender, and they have several categories elsewhere in the Talmud about different kinds of transgender people. And they and the way I know this is because when I was studying Talmud many years ago, I can't remember exactly where and under what circumstances that might have happened, but it did. And there was, for example, Kohanim, which I am a Kohen, who could serve in the temple. And they said if you are mixed genitalia of part man and part woman, you're considered disqualified from being a priest in the temple.
Bernie,
Again, they don't say anything, nasty about people like that, but they say you're not eligible to be a Kohen in the temple. So it's
It
certainly
doesn't
not,
say that.
it's not giving them equal rights, but it's not, they don't make any negative slurs. It's just they're interested in the law, what's allowed, what's not allowed, and they like clear categories. So if you're a mixed category, half male, half female, that's not they, that their thinking is that we want clear categories. So it is mentioned, but here they're helping to develop a system of when they can say who can marry who. So it's only men with women in the Talmud, and it's only certain women. So your aunt, for example, is disqualified. Your father's sister, you can't do that. Your mother's sister, you can't do that. That's based on something else. It's not listed here, at least, and so forth. They also say your father's second wife, who's not your mother. So your mother dies, your father remarries a much younger woman, then your father dies. So ever since you met your stepmother, you thought she was very sexy. So now you're single, she's single, you want to marry her. She may only still be 25 years old. So you can't, because she was previously married to your father. And then they use these verses to justify legal decisions.
Rabbi,
Okay, comments, questions?
Bernie,
Yeah, I have a question. This prohibition of bestiality in order to cement the idea that you have to have children, does that lead to an Orthodox view opposing birth control?
No. No, I don't know why, but Orthodoxy allows birth control. Again, they try to limit it as much as possible, but they allow it. And similarly, you can marry, let's say, Bernie, you meet a nice woman in your complex, and she's over 45 or 50 or whatever, and she's not going to have any more children. You can still marry her and have sex with her. So they don't prohibit that either, even though it appears that they do, they don't. So, so this is the Talmud. The later codes of Jewish law don't necessarily always follow exactly what the Talmud is, but they try not to directly repudiate it. It's complicated, but yeah, Marcia.
I vaguely remember, isn't there something about if your brother dies, you are obligated
Yeah.
to marry his wife?
Yes, that's Yivum and Chalitza. So that is if, let's say, let's say I have a brother, and we each have lands. I own 6,000 acres in downtown Phoenix. And I'm married. I'm married only a year or so, and the stress of being rabbi out here is too much, and I have a massive heart attack, and God forbid I die. So now my wife is a widow, and we never had children because I was too busy running my congregation. But there's all this land and the inheritance. My brother would be obligated, according to the Torah elsewhere, to marry my wife as a second wife, but the children that he would have with her would be considered my children, and then they would inherit my estate in his name.
Wait, that's confusing. The children would be from the first marriage are now considered the second, your children?
My brother has his own 6,000 acres.
Yeah, I know about the acres.
and he's got his own wife, and he has his
Yeah.
own kids. And when he dies, his kids are going to inherit all that land in downtown Denver.
Yeah.
But my wife, doesn't have any children and no longer has a husband, and so there's nobody to inherit my 6,000 acres. He'll marry her, and the children that he will produce with her, hopefully, will be regarded as my children and will inherit my estate.
Okay, so they have full hereditary rights, basically.
So even, so they found someone who's the closest genetic donor to me, which would be my brother. But they're not regarded as part of my brother's estate, they're regarded as part of my estate.
Okay,
If the woman doesn't want to do it, she has to perform a ceremony where she spits in a shoe and throws it at the brother. And
Really?
then the whole deal is off. And then I don't know, my 6,000 acres, maybe she inherits part of it or all of it, and she does with it what she wants. The rest, maybe she inherits part of it, and part of it goes to the rest of my family. The whole thing is dissolved. And then I don't have any heirs that are going to carry on my 6,000 acres and build a empire in downtown Phoenix. Part of it will be owned by my siblings, and part of it will be owned by my wife, and part of it'll all be dissolved. So it would be better to have the brother marry my wife and to preserve my legacy if everyone is willing.
Now that brother,
Okay, let's move
the
on to
what?
another commentary. We're going to keep going down. This is Lekach Tov, and we'll see, a lot of them say similar things. And then we'll do Bereshit Rabbah underneath, which is for the next verse. Okay, do you see where I am? Lekach Tov, V'davak b'ishto, and cleaves to his wife. Everyone sees where I am on the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, right there.
And cleaves to his wife. This text represents the eternal command, avoid illicit sexual unions. For when the verse states, that is why a man leaves his father and mother, it forbids coupling with one's father's relatives and one's mother's relatives. Furthermore, when the verse continues and cleaves to his wife, it means that one may not lie with a woman to whom he is merely betrothed. This explains the language of the wedding benediction formulated by the sages. Blessed be God who forbade betrothed women to us, but permitted married women. Okay.
There must have been a lot of that going around.
In the Talmud, there are two wedding ceremonies. There's betrothal and marriage. And in Talmudic times, they were sometimes done a year apart. So if in my later years I decided to get married and I got betrothed to a woman, we would not live together yet, but we would be obligated to follow the rules of, marriage. In other words, you couldn't marry somebody else. And then when we have the actual marriage ceremony, we have the second marriage ceremony, and then we live like man and wife. The rabbis later felt that this was not practical. It raised a lot of problems because you had a lot of time to get into big trouble. So they just today's Jewish wedding ceremony, you have both ceremonies in the same. So in other words, they get betrothed, and then 5 or 10 minutes later, they get married in the same chuppah, to avoid a situation where a couple might be betrothed but not married, and then they have all the obligations but none of the benefits. Comments on this?
Pam.
In the Orthodox, isn't there something where once the parents decide that these boy and girl are getting married, that there is some type of, but not a betrothal, but something that has been written in that, okay, they're going to get married and it's all written up.
Promise.
Yeah. So some Hasidic families will fix up their kids at a very young age and say, our 4-year-old son's going to marry your 4-year-old daughter when they're older. And then when they get older, they meet each other or they know each other a little bit, and they give their consent based on a couple of meetings, and then they get married.
So they can't marry other people because at an early age, they were linked into this certain person.
Maybe, well, in that society, you have to, the families control everything, and they're getting them married off at age 18 or so they don't have time to think about any of that stuff, and they don't have access to make their own the only way they can make independent decisions would be to break away from their society.
Yeah.
But they're not technically betrothed. I'm pretty sure. So there's no halachic thing there. It's just a societal thing.
Yeah.
In the rabbinic period, you might actually get betrothed. And so then if you were to commit adultery, if you were to have sex with somebody else, that would be adultery, even though you're not really married.
Well, the book that the Temple Book Club is reading is about a Hasidic family where, they marry at 16 and it's all arranged, and that's in modern times.
Yeah. That's, I grew up in a family like that and I broke away. Other comments and questions at this point? We'll move on to Bereshit Rabbah, which is
Rabbi.
yes.
He had his hand up. Sai?
Oh, I think this whole thing is getting to be very political and certainly very arbitrary. I can't understand the rabbis who are making all these decisions. It seems that the whole community is in the hands of a few people who are making decisions for everybody else. And
Exactly.
that's, to me, that's kind of wrong.
That's exactly how I feel. And there are other groups that were, for example, the Sadducees disagreed with the rabbis. And the Sadducees said, you're completely wrong, and that all these interpretations you're coming up with here, you're making them up, and they're not valid. Later, the Karaites said the same thing. But the rabbis managed to dominate, and so their view was the dominant one for a long time, and is very much the dominant one in Israel today.
When Israel had kingdoms, King David, King Solomon, did the rabbis have as much power?
No, there were no rabbis yet.
But there were priests.
There were priests. I'm a Kohen, so I would be okay. And the priests ran the temple, and there were no rabbis, not for 800 years later.
It was running the temple, not making decisions.
Well, they made some decisions. If they ran the temple, they certainly wanted as much religious power as they could get. So where did the rabbis come from? And why did they get so much power so quickly? That's one of
That's what amazes me.
What?
Amazes me.
What?
It amazes him.
Oh, yeah, well, there's a lot we don't know about exactly how the development of Judaism occurred, but there were certain points where new groups came along that had not previously been known. And as I keep saying, there's some connection between the development of Talmudic Judaism and the Maccabean revolt. But apparently these ideas were already circulating around before the Maccabean revolt, but the fight against radical Hellenism seems to have given it a big boost. Marcia.
I don't think it's amazing, Sai, because even in our time now, religious beliefs are coloring the laws of our areas of our country. You brought up abortion, or somebody did along the way, and the anti-abortion laws are based on a religious belief. And so it's still that kind of action is still prevalent, you know.
But they're not arbitrary. People have
Of course
discussed
it's
them,
arbitrary.
people are voting on them. People are making decisions whether they want them or not. In this case, you're being told what you have to do or what you.
If I
not
live in
supposed to
Texas
do.
and I can't get an abortion, that is not arbitrary. That's the way it is, you know? So,
All right, let's look at verse 25 at the very bottom of the page. This is Bereshit Rabbah, which is a midrash written by rabbis that was published a little bit later, maybe around the year 400 or 600 CE. And it starts with the words "velo yitbosheshu," and they were not ashamed. So that this is referring to that they were wandering around the garden naked. If you wandered around Arrowhead naked, you would presumably feel ashamed because this is not socially acceptable behavior. It's not part of the norms of our society. If you're at a nudist resort, the norms are that everyone goes naked. So then there's no reason to feel ashamed, but you're feeling ashamed because you're violating the norms of society. But they were not ashamed. Rabbi Eliezer taught 3 characters did not have peace for even 6 hours. Is Adam, Israel, and Sisera. Concerning Adam, the Torah states, "Velo yitbaishu."
we gotta
The
move
Torah states,
side.
you see where I am?
No, don't we have to move the page sideways?
No,
Gotta come up a little bit.
I moved the page for you, I think.
yes, you did.
Getting it later.
Yeah, you see it there? States "Velo yitbaishu." Understanding this phrase to mean 6 hours had not yet come before he sinned. That is, the man disobeyed God after just 6 hours of life. With regard to the nation of Israel, the verse states, when the people saw that Moses was long delayed in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said to him, "Get up, make us gods to go before us." They waited 6 hours into the expected day of Moses' return before constructing the golden calf. With regard to Sisera, the verse states, through the window she peered. Sisera's mother wailed through the lattice. Why does his chariot tarry so? Why so late? The clank of his chariots, from the book of Judges. The mother was accustomed to her son regularly returning at 3 or 4 hours into the day, and here 6 hours had passed and he still was not back. Comments? The part that's most important for us is the part about Adam, where it says that, there we go, that Adam, right there, that Adam sinned before even 6 hours. I can't see all the hands, but
Can you move the page over just a little bit to the left?
which you,
Your left. Other way,
Oh, I see. Her.
other side.
you want the left side,
Yes, sir.
this bottom part.
Well, and further over. The top page to the right,
There we
you
go.
go.
Now
So you
go
can
up.
see the whole text.
All right.
Can you go a little further?
Oh, I see. You want both the left and the right at the same
No,
time.
just
Yeah, this is okay.
like that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, the mother was accustomed to her son regularly returning.
Just a little bit more and say, but they were not ashamed. This is Midrash Agada, another Midrash. We learn from this that the Holy One, blessed be He, did not create human beings fully clothed in the way that He fashioned the animals with their fur, feathers, or scales. Furthermore, they were not embarrassed at their nakedness because they lacked any evil inclination. So we learn from this verse that they were not ashamed, that they were not created with anything on them. Whereas dogs are born with fur, ducks are born with feather, fish are born with scales, basically clothes. So you could think from that people would be born with clothes, but they weren't. And they weren't embarrassed at their nakedness because they lacked any evil inclination. Okay, comments? Pam, Marcia,
Richard,
Richard?
The comment that I have here, it would appear that this is before they ate of the apple of knowledge.
Yes.
Correct.
They were naive, to say the
Correct.
least. But once they ate the apple, they looked at themselves and said, "Oh, we're naked. We better get clothed."
Correct.
Those figs and loin cloth.
And
So
in the third
if we never
testament,
ate of the apple, we'd all be looking at each other nude.
right, if we hadn't eaten of the apple.
I
And
better start working up my muscles so I look good.
we're all going to be going to the gym more.
Yeah, well, I have to go. So I'm gonna sign out. This is interesting. I still like the first book we used, the original book.
Okay.
Harvey Fields. Yeah,
Marcia?
So when you read most of the comments in the, or even, this is a midrash, okay, they lack any evil inclination. The whole Bible and the whole orthodoxy seems always to consider sex to be evil, and there's always a, you know, all the caveats that, you know, men can't shake hands with women, can't look at them at this time and at that time, and it puts a whole different tilt to the whole idea about sex than that.
Well, I don't see anything here that says that sex itself is evil. I see a tremendous effort for the rabbis to limit sex to within a marriage between one man and one woman only. So they don't want extramarital sex, premarital sex. They don't want extramarital sex. They don't want gay sex. They don't want any sex except within marriage.
But that last sentence in that Midrash Agada, they were not embarrassed because they lacked any evil inclination.
Okay.
You know.
Now, I don't know, does evil inclination mean sex drive?
What is the evil going to be?
I understand evil inclination is the desire to do bad things, to gossip, to compare, to covet, to excessive materialism.
It seems that it puts that tilt on it, so that the Orthodox are always covering themselves up to the eyeballs, you know, with the high clothes. We saw this in the book that we were reading for book club, and they have to act in certain ways that keep them pure, so to speak, and to basically to keep the men from coveting everybody in sight, apparently. So, you know, it's a hard go.
Pam, comment?
Pam, you have to unmute.
She's working on it.
There, I'm unmuted. No, I just, my thing on this is in ancient times, they needed a lot of kids and they wanted healthy kids. And I think the whole thing is based on that. They needed a big family to run their little operation and they wanted healthy kids. And that's why they, you know, wanted them to be fruitful and multiply. You know, you get multiple wives and you make sure you had healthy children. I think that's the whole thing. That's what they needed. So.
Okay, and that's to this very day, the ultra Orthodox in Israel in the 75 years, the state of Israel have increased from less than 1% to like 14%.
Yes. Yeah,
So that's a huge increase.
yeah. And in the book we're reading for book club, I mean, they were having their kids get married around age 16 or 17 or 18.
Yes, and that's still, I think, the norm.
Yeah.
I'm going to push ahead a little bit to chapter 3, verse 1. Vayomer el ha'isha, and the snake asked the woman. And this is from Philo, and this part was translated by my friend from San Diego. Did the serpent speak with a human voice? In the first place, there is no reason to presuppose that other animals beside humankind did not have the power of articulate speech. However, only man excelled in possessing a greater fluency and lucidity of language. Secondly, when necessary, God will change the means by which creatures' natures operate. Thirdly, most of us lack an acute capacity to understand the voice of every creature. God endowed man and woman with this capacity so that they might be pure from evil and remain uncontaminated. Comments? Steve, any comments there you see?
Well, I mean, how do you determine if a serpent actually spoke? Maybe it was gestures that, you know, his head pointed up toward the apple, and you know, this is just my interpretation, but determined that this is what you take that down and eat it, then you're gonna suffer.
If a rattlesnake was pointing toward an apple, I would stay away from the apple. I'd be
I
afraid
would
if I
stay away from the snake.
yeah. I and this snake is somebody you really do want to stay away from.
Yes, yes. Science
Bereshit,
say that.
Yeah.
Bereshit Rabbah, the
If-
very
if-
bottom of the page, the
if
serpent
this is-
was the slyest. It was taught in the name of Rabbi Meir. The severity of the serpent's downfall matched the height of his wickedness. At first, the animal is described as the slyest of all the wild animals the Lord God had made. And later, whoops. And later, God
You missed it.
I lost up there.
oops. And later, God tells
There.
huh. See if I can find it in the book. Oh, okay. It's right on the next page there. Should be over here. There it is. And later God tells it, you are cursed more than all the animals and all the wild beasts. Rabbi Hoshea the elder taught, initially, the serpent stood erect like a reed and walked on his feet. Rabbi Yirmiyahu ben Elazar taught, the serpent was a heretic, didn't believe in the right beliefs. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar taught, the serpent resembled a camel. When it sinned, the world was robbed of a great service, for had it behaved, men could have employed the animal as a carrier for transport goods. It asked the woman, said the serpent to the woman, did God say that you must not eat from any tree in the garden? Rabbi Hanina ben Sansan said there were 4 whose sins were introduced with the word af, literally, indeed, or also, and were therefore punished through anger, also af. The serpent, the chief baker, the assembly of Korach, and Haman. Regarding the serpent, the verse says, did God indeed, af, say that you must not eat from any tree in the garden? With regard to the chief baker, the text says, the chief baker said to Joseph, I too, af, had a dream. The rebellion led by Korach declared, and more af, you have not brought us to a land flowing with milk and honey. And Haman himself brought a boast, and Esther brought no one else off with the king to her feast but me. And tomorrow too, I am invited to her along with the king. Comments? This is a very common rabbinic technique. They take a certain word that is common to different places in the Tanakh, and then they say there's something parallel between these situations because of the presence of a certain word. And here we're comparing the story of the snake in the Garden of Eden with the baker in the story of Joseph, the rebellion of Korach, and the story of the book of Esther.
Mhm.
For 4 interesting stories that you would never really think to associate with one another. Okay, any comments on Bereshit Rabbah about the snake walking on 2 feet, the snake being like a camel, or the comparison with the other holidays?
Bernie,
Yes, whatever you want to believe.
Ty,
This is,
There,
I love it because it's pretty wild. I mean, the guys who wrote this, they had imagination. I like the remark about the camels. If the serpent had behaved himself, he would have been a camel. Well, he didn't, and he remained a serpent. But where did all the camels come from? Ah, ah, good stuff.
good comment, good comment.
I'm going to keep pushing forward just because our time is almost at. We're at verse 2, Bereshit Rabbah. The woman told the serpent. And so you remember the serpent talks to the woman, and the woman then talks back to the serpent. And so Bereshit Rabbah, which is another midrash, says, where was the man? Where was Adam while the serpent was misleading the woman? The snake and the woman have a lot of dialogue. Where's the man?
He was playing pickleball.
In a net.
Abba ben Periah said the couple had lain together, they'd had sex, and the man was now sleeping. The sages explain, at that hour, the Holy One, blessed be he, had taken the man on a tour of the entire world, teaching him where it would be appropriate to plant trees and which land was suitable for sowing crops. Thus, the verse which speaks of a land never diversified, where no one, Adam, which could mean just a person, but in this case it means Adam, ever dwelt. From the book of Jeremiah. So the rabbis are quoting, and that refers to a country where even the first man did not visit. So there's 2 explanations here. Where was Adam when the snake was trying to mislead Eve? If Adam had been there, Adam might have said to Eve, don't listen to that stupid snake. He's wrong. But Adam was either sleeping after sex or on a world tour without his wife. Comments?
Some things never change.
Sorry.
What I've tried to show you just in a few minutes this morning is some of these commentaries that specifically come from one group, the rabbis, that were written between the year 200 and 600 or so CE. And you're getting a little idea how they use biblical citations to support arguments which may or may not have any logical basis. If you're a supporter of this, you accept their methodology. If you're not, and you're looking for rational logic here, you may not find it. You can also see certain methodologies. They take a word off, which means even so, or something like that. They find that word in 4 stories, including the story of the snake. And then they say these stories have certain parallels in terms of the character of the main character, the character of the main character, because of the presence of the same Hebrew word. Whereas if you and I look at it, would say, well, it's a common word. It's just really a joining word. It doesn't really mean anything. So it's irrelevant. These are 4 separate stories with no necessary connection. The rabbis don't believe any word in the Torah is, just random. So if God uses the same word, there must be God is trying to say you need to compare these stories. Clearly, the snake is also portrayed in different ways, but mostly they seem to be pretty harsh with him. And they do so because it's an etiological story that the snake has obviously lost his feet. He has to crawl, he has to push himself on the ground. People saw this and they said that can't be pleasant. And there must be a reason the snake doesn't have feet. Dogs have feet, lizards have feet. Why does the snake not have feet? And the reason is he must have been punished. Marcia.
A lot of Renaissance and paintings in that era, maybe even earlier, depict the snake in more of a human form in the paintings, so sort of the devil incarnate, and I think that's another part of it. It's not in this discussion here, but I think it has to be considered. Is the snake the presence of pure evil in this story, in these stories,
The idea that the snake represents the devil is I believe in rabbinic thinking, but not in the ones we read.
Right.
And so the devil was a fallen angel, not a person, but would be able to assume human form. Again, if so, the devil deliberately waits till Adam is either asleep or away and tries to influence the woman, who is generally perceived of as, if nothing else, gullible.
which is then again a social commentary by the rabbis.
Yes, well, the rabbis were men. Women at the time were not allowed access to the same sort of education. Women that did achieve it anyway were viewed of with suspicion. Rabbi Meir's wife, Bruria, achieved a very high level of scholarship, and they implied that she went crazy or something very bad happened to the couple because of her ambitions to be a scholar. It was not an egalitarian society. It was not a gay-friendly society. It was a long time ago. Steve.
Well, Bernie has his hand up, and then we need to conclude.
My overall impression of this whole business is that the people who wrote this have a conclusion and they look for data to support their conclusion rather than the other way around.
Right. And that's why it's hard for me to have a very involved conversation with my friend Philip about these kinds of things in Judaism, because he just accepts them. And for him, these are all part of God's religion. Okay, we do want to have a lunch to plan the Torah study for this year. That's increasingly a high priority. So if you can let me and Steve know. So far it's me, Steve, and Marcia, but we'd really like a few more to help us with concrete plans. So thank you. If you could email us, and we'll try to set that up, hopefully within the next 10 days.
Did you choose a date?
Not yet.
Steve will hopefully Steve and
I'll
I,
get a
and
date.
we'll
Well,
try.
you can put me on the list.
Okay, very good, Minion. Thank you.
And Pam,
Pam too. Pam too. Bernie, we're gonna make sure you have a flight ready for you.
Thought we were gonna do it at my local Panera.
Oh, okay. Okay. Before we conclude with the blessing, there's a couple things going on at the temple that I think you guys should be interested in. First of all, grab your Western wear, all your garb, and we're gonna have a hoedown at the temple Saturday night. Starts at 5:30 to 8. It's gonna be a lot of fun. If you want to put the rabbi in jail because he said something to you that you disagreed with, you're gonna have to bail, somebody's gonna have to bail him out. There's gonna be line dancing, a barbecue dinner, a 50-50 raffle, and a cakewalk. So it should be a lot of fun. And so gather your garb and let's go down and have a hee-haw time.
Mhm.
So that's my announcement. Rabbi, do you have anything else to say?
No, thank you very much, and I hope any feedback on this experiment, you can email me.
Got it. Let's
Okay.
conclude then. Let's the
With
blessing.
the blessing as Steve will lead us.
Ready together? Baruch atah Adonai
Adonai,
Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam notah b'tokenu. Baruch atah Adonai
no,
notein haTorah. Blessed is Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who has given us the teaching of Torah, implanting in us eternal life. Blessed Adonai,
Giver of the
the
Torah.
Torah. Amen.
Amen.
and may.
All righty, I'll send an information as far as when we're gonna meet and at which Panera we'll go to, so. All
or
right,
Starbucks maybe or something.
say again?
I said, or Starbucks or something like that.
Well, yeah, I think Panera might be a
You
little
want to
bit.
make a luncheon out of it, okay.
Yeah, I think so. All right, have a great rest of the week. Rabbi, thank you.
You Friday night.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
See you at the hoedown.
You bet.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.